All right, so today our topic is setting objectives and designing what we call the creative brief. Okay, and then one moment. All right, so first we have to define what objectives are. So, objectives, they state what outcomes will be achieved. And then when we talk about strategy, it tells us how we're going to achieve those objectives or those outcomes. So, if you remember in the previous class, we talked about situational analysis. We analyze where the client or the brand is currently, and then we decide what we want to do with that brand. So this is where the objectives come in. So once we understand the marketing environment, the situational analysis is done, then next we have to develop specific marketing objectives. So what are marketing objectives? Marketing objectives state what the marketing function must do so the company can achieve its overall business objectives. So first we're going to talk about marketing objectives, but in the next slide, we'll read about what we call marketing related objectives. So there's a simple difference. The marketing objectives, as we explain it here, they are broad, they're overall, they're more general. For example, these are sample objectives. We have growth, expanding market share, or increasing profits. So they're very general. But when we go to the next slide, and we have what we call marketing related objectives, this time they're specific to either the brands, the customer segments, or the product features. For example, and I know Jamal is here. Jamal, could you read the example of marketing related objectives?
Grow sales of product X by 30% over the next 12 months or increase market share among affluent consumers to 45 to 65.
Okay. So earlier in the marketing objectives, it was just grow sales. But now it's very specific. Product X by how many percent? By 30%. And then in what time frame? Within 12 months. And then earlier we had just increased market share. But now it's even more specific. What segment of consumers we are going to increase market share among the rich or affluent consumers? What age group? 45 to 65. Okay, so again, if we speak of marketing objectives, they're more overall, they're more general, whereas when we go to marketing related objectives, they're much more specific. They give the brand, the segments, and maybe features as well. Okay, so those were marketing objectives. What's the difference now between marketing objectives and advertising objectives? So if we speak of advertising objectives, we're talking about the communication tasks that an advertisement seeks to achieve. So what are the tasks? It could be in the form of trial, it could be in the form of continuity, it could be in the form of brand switching. So what are these different things? Camille, can you tell us about trial? Camille? Okay. So trial is informing the consumer about a product. That's trial. Then continuity, we remind them about the product. And then brand switching is we persuade the customer to shift from one brand to another brand. So trial, continuity, and switching. Okay. So next we have these ad objectives or these advertising objectives. They're connected to what we call the life cycle of the product. So the life cycle of a product, for example, at the very beginning of the life cycle of a product, we encourage customers to try the product. That's why we said trial earlier. We encourage them to try. And then as the product matures, as the product becomes more known, then we remind the current customers to continue buying the product. And in the next phase, this are the later stages. We have switching or switch back. So what's the difference? Switching is there's competition, and we're trying to convince or persuade their consumers to switch to our product. And then switch back, on the other hand, it could be like we had this group of customers before, and then they replaced us with this other product. So now we're going to do something to convince them to switch back, to come back to us. And this takes place in what we call the rejuvenation phase. So how do we convince them? We highlight product features that are new, and another possibility is we lower the price. Okay, so we have marketing objectives, we also have advertising objectives. Then we have what we call the Dagmar model. So Dagmar is an acronym for defining advertising goals for measured advertising results. And the Dagmar model was developed by Russell Coley. He wanted to find a way to set objectives and measure the results of advertising. So how do we do this? So Coley stated that the process can be achieved, we can achieve an advertising objective by breaking it down into 4 phases. So let's look at the 4 phases according to the Dagmar model by Russell Coley. Okay, so first is awareness. Camille, what is awareness?
Awareness. Consumer must first be made aware that a particular brand or offering exists. I've heard of it.
Okay, so of course the first step is to, let people know, hey, we exist. We have a product or we have a brand. Okay. After that, we have comprehension. So in comprehension, the consumer must understand what the product is about, what the offering is, how will it benefit them. So from I've heard about it or I've heard of it, now is I know what it is. I know what the product is, I know what its advantages are, what its benefits are. And Jomel will read conviction.
Conviction. Consumers must likely want to buy the product they want to get.
Okay, so it's not enough that they've heard about the product, it's not enough that they know it's good for them, they have to want the product. And finally, and hopefully this is the outcome that every client is expecting for, we have action. So I've bought it, meaning we have to create that necessary action of purchase. Okay, so from awareness, comprehension, conviction, and action. And then we proceed to another explanation. So it's really nice about the Dagmar model is that the objectives are concrete, they are measurable. So how do we accomplish this? Camille, could you read the second item, please?
We have a precise statement of the message to communicate to the target audience and have a way to measure whether the intended message has been communicated properly.
Okay, so it's very important. When the objective is crafted, it is a precise statement of the measure. But more than that, we have to have a way, a precise statement of the message, but we have to find a way to measure whether the message is actually communicated properly. So it's not enough that we created this really good communication message. We have to be sure that it's being communicated properly. For example, what if the objective is, do people see our product as a healthy alternative? So it's actually not that difficult to measure the effectivity of the message or the effectiveness of the message. We could just ask shoppers, hey, do you think our product is a healthier option than that of the competitions? So that's what we mean by precise statement that has to be measurable. Okay. And in the next slide, we have one moment. Okay. So we also have, aside from marketing objectives, advertising objectives, we also have creative objectives. So when we speak of creatives, we are talking about the form and the content of the advertising. We're talking about what we want to say. We're talking about emotion. How do we say it? We talk about production value or production objectives, what the advertisements are supposed to look like. So an example given here, and Sarlane has joined us. So Sarlane, could you read please the example?
Sorry po, na-late ako. For
It's okay.
example, the creative objective might specify that the advertising will reinforce existing aspects of the
Mhm.
brand personality, modify old perceptions of the brand, or steal new brand characteristics.
Okay. So those are the possible creative objectives. There are really cool stuff already about the brand personality. We just have to reinforce it. Or maybe people have an obsolete idea about the product already or the brand, and we have to modify um, these perceptions. Or maybe we have to instill new characteristics into the brand. So these all fall under what we call creative objectives. And in the next slide, we have, okay, so marketing objectives, advertising objectives, creative objectives, and now we've got media objectives. So these are the elements of media objectives: the target audience objectives, or who, the geographic objectives, the frequency, how frequently, what's the timing, the scheduling, and the reach, those objectives, and as well as marketing coordination and money. So, meaning, do we have a sizable budget to accomplish what the client wants, or maybe the client is expecting too much on a very small budget? So, we have to consider what media could be utilized given the budget provided by the client. And then we have marketing strategy. So marketing strategy is all about the mix of the four P's. Okay, how do we achieve the objectives? By looking at the four P's. So product, price, and then there'll be two other P's on the next slide. Well, let's go to product first. Jamal will read product definition.
Product definition. What features should the product have? What should the product packaging look like? Should there be accompanying support services such as maintenance?
Oh, okay. So ideally, when you buy a product, especially if it's an appliance or a utility of some sort, there should be somebody you can call. Should something wrong happen to the product? Should the appliance break down, for example? But it doesn't even need to be an appliance. Even a musical instrument like a piano. If you buy a piano and there's no one who visits once a year to tune the keys, then eventually the sounds of the piano will be out of key. So that's an example of a support service. So some sellers are very good at selling their items, but when it comes to after sales service, sometimes they're very difficult to reach, or sometimes even though they respond, they're not very good in answering our questions or resolving our issues. So it's not just the features, it's not just the packaging, we're also talking about support services.